Poverty is not only a condition of the wallet, it's often a reflection of the mind. The chains that bind us are not always forged from metal. Sometimes they are made of thought. If you find yourself stuck in poverty, look not only at your circumstances but also at your mindset. Here are 5 mental prisons that can silently sabotage your potential and keep you tethered to reality that does not reflect your true power. Most people don't realize they're trapped, not by walls or cages, but by thoughts. Scarcity thinking is one of the most silent and deceptive traps of the mind. It doesn't scream or rattle chains, it whispers. It says, there's not enough for everyone. If someone else wins, you lose. Or there's no room for you at the table. This mindset becomes a lens through which you see the world. Everything becomes a competition. Every opportunity feels like a once in a lifetime lottery ticket, and when you don't get it, it confirms your belief that life is limited. This mental scarcity doesn't just shape how you act, it shapes what you believe you're even allowed to want. Curiosity convinces people to settle for less. If you think there's never enough money, you won't dream bigger. You'll cling to a job you hate, pass on starting that business, or avoid asking for a raise. Why? Because in your mind, resources are scarce and going after more is risky. You'll play life safe and small and call it realistic. But what's really happening is this: you're bargaining with fear and calling it wisdom. In a world with over 8 billion people, new ideas being born every second, and opportunities being created even in crisis, do you really believe the pie is fixed? The scarcity mindset builds invisible ceilings above our heads. You stop asking what's possible and start asking what's allowed. What's wild is that scarcity thinking doesn't only affect people in poverty. You could have millions and still feel broke inside. You could be surrounded by opportunities and still live like doors are closing. It becomes less about your bank account and more about your belief system. You could be given a chance, and instead of seizing it, you doubt it. You wonder, is this for real or do I deserve this? So you self sabotage. Scarcity thinking breeds fear of loss, and fear of loss makes you hold on so tightly to what little you have that your fists are too clenched to receive anything more. You protect crumbs and never bake the cake. One of the most dangerous effects of scarcity is that it creates division. If I believe there's not enough, then I can't celebrate your win. Your success feels like a threat to mine. Instead of collaboration, we get comparison. Instead of growth, we get envy. And it's this mindset that keeps communities poor, not just in wealth, but in connection. A scarcity thinker says, I have to get mine before someone else does, while an abundance thinker says, we rise higher when we lift together. And as Kate Nilti does say, the truth is, wealth is not just measured in dollars. It's in ideas, support, creativity, and belief. But none of those flourish in scarcity. They grow in generosity. To begin to break free from this mindset, you have to be willing to unlearn. You have to challenge everything you've absorbed from your environment, your upbringing, and even your culture. Just because you were raised in lack doesn't mean you have to live in it mentally forever. Just because the people around you see life as limited doesn't mean they're right. You have to become someone who sees possibility. even when it's not obvious. It takes courage to say, I reject this lens, especially when it's the only one you've ever known. But remember this, most great changes begin with a shift no one else can see except you. There's a quiet belief that can slowly take the driver's seat in your life without you even noticing. It's the belief that life is something that happens to you, not something you shape. You wake up, go through the motions, and brace yourself for whatever life throws at you, as if you have no say, no power, no steering wheel in your own journey. This mindset is seductive because it takes the burden off your shoulders. If everything is someone else's fault, then you never have to look inward. You never have to question your own choices. But while it may feel comforting in the short term, this belief is also what keeps you chained. Because the moment you give up responsibility, you give up your ability to change. When you live as a victim of your circumstances, you are constantly at the mercy of your past, your environment, and the people around you. You start seeing yourself as a character in someone else's story instead of the author of your own. Every setback becomes proof that the universe is against you. Every failure becomes someone else's doing. But here's the hard truth. When you constantly externalize blame, you also externalize power. You give away your potential to rewrite the script. You might not have chosen where you started, but staying there mentally and emotionally is a decision. Victimhood might feel like a shield, but really it's a cage. This mindset also breeds a dangerous kind of comfort, a comfort in the familiar pain. You start to identify with the struggle so deeply that it becomes who you are. Without even realizing it, you become attached to the narrative of being the one who's been through it. You begin to wear your wounds like medals and tell your story not with hope but with helplessness. And if anyone suggests that you can rise above it, it feels like an attack instead of an invitation. But you are not your trauma. You are not your struggle. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become despite it. What makes the victim mentality so dangerous is how it distorts your view of effort. When you believe life is just happening to you, hard work starts to feel pointless. Why try when nothing ever changes? Why plan when the world doesn't play fair? This is the thinking that keeps you stuck. It convinces you that your actions don't matter, so you stop taking any. And the longer you live in that space, the more your self belief erodes. Before long, you stop dreaming, you stop building, you stop expecting better. And that's how poverty of the mind becomes poverty in reality, not because you couldn't grow, but because you stopped trying. It's important to understand that rejecting the victim mentality doesn't mean ignoring the real pain, injustice, or struggle you faced. It simply means you're no longer letting those things define your identity. You're allowed to acknowledge your wounds and still stand tall. You're allowed to say, yes, this happened, but it's not the end of my story. Responsibility is not blame, it's power. It means you start asking, what can I do with what I have? Instead of, why did this happen to me? That question alone shifts the energy. It takes you out of survival mode and puts you in creator mode. The most powerful shift a person can make is from victim of life to leader of life. It doesn't require a miracle, it requires a mindset shift, a decision to take ownership of your thoughts, your actions, your next move. And that decision can happen in a quiet moment when you finally say, I'm done waiting for rescue. Because the truth is, no one is coming. And that's not depressing, it's liberating. You are the one you've been waiting for. And when you stop letting life happen to you and start choosing what you do with life, everything begins to change. There's a silent thief that robs people of their future, and most never see it coming. It doesn't wear a mask or break into your home, it comes wrapped in comfort, disguised as a harmless choice. The decision to satisfy yourself now rather than build something better later. It whispers, you deserve this, why wait? And just this once. And slowly it becomes a pattern. This is the trap of short term gratification. The desire to feel good right now becomes more important than the desire to become great later. In that moment, the future fades, and all that matters is now. But here's the catch: the life you want most is built through the choices you delay, not the ones you indulge. We live in a culture that worships convenience and speed. One click orders, same day delivery, instant likes, instant results. We've been conditioned to believe that if something takes time, it's not worth it, that if it's not easy, it's not for us. But anything truly valuable, wealth, health, skill, self respect, takes time, it takes sacrifice. It requires discomfort today for a better version of you tomorrow. When short term gratification becomes the ruler of your decisions, you begin to trade your calling for comfort, your vision for validation, and your progress for pleasure. And the worst part, you often don't even notice the cost until years have passed and you're still in the same place. The person stuck in poverty isn't always lacking talent, intelligence, or opportunity. Sometimes they are just caught in the loop of choosing temporary highs over permanent growth. Instead of saving, they spend. Instead of studying, they scroll. Instead of investing, they escape. It's not about shame, it's about awareness. Because the small decisions you make every day, what you eat, what you watch, what you do with your time, are quietly shaping your destiny. And the scary thing is, life won't send you a warning when you're drifting off course. It just lets you wake up one day and realize you've been drifting for years. Every person who's built a life of meaning, wealth, or purpose has one thing in common: they learned to delay, they learned to plant seeds and wait for the harvest, even when everyone else was looking for shortcuts. The truth is, the things that come fast often fall apart faster, but the things you build slowly, those become unshakable. The grind, the patience, the sacrifice, it all compounds. And while short term gratification will always scream for your attention, wisdom whispers. It says, wait, build, grow, trust the process. If you can learn to hear that voice and follow it, you'll become unstoppable. Not because you had more, but because you learned to wait for what mattered most. There's a question that echoes silently in the back of so many minds. What if I fail? It doesn't scream, it whispers, and that whisper can be louder than the boldest ambition. Fear of failure is not always loud and obvious. Sometimes it's subtle. It shows up as procrastination, as overthinking, as staying busy with things that don't matter just so you don't have to face what does. It masks itself as procrastinism or logic or even self care. But beneath it all is the same core belief: if I try and I fall, I won't be able to handle the weight of that failure. So instead, you play small, you delay, you avoid. Not because you don't have dreams, but because fear has convinced you that trying is too dangerous. Fear of failure also has a sneaky way of shrinking your goals. You start aiming low, not because you want less, but because it's safer to hit small targets than risk missing big ones. You start adjusting your dreams to fit your fears instead of expanding your courage to match your dreams. And in doing so, you settle, not just in your career or finances, but in who you are. You become a watered down version of yourself, operating below your capacity just to avoid the sting of falling short. But here's the truth: falling short while aiming high is still progress. Shrinking your life just to stay safe is the real loss. To rise above fear, you must change your relationship with failure. Start seeing it as feedback, not defeat, as proof that you're in motion, not a message to stop. Failure is how you learn, how you sharpen, how you separate what doesn't work from what does. Every time you try and fall, you gain something: resilience, clarity, courage, and those qualities compound. Over time, you become the kind of person who no longer fears failure, not because it doesn't hurt, but because you've learned that you can survive it. And more than that, you can grow from it. Your power is not in your perfection, it's in your persistence. So ask yourself, what would I do if I wasn't afraid of failing? What business would you start? What call would you make? What talent would you share with the world? The answers to those questions are where your potential lives, and fear is the gatekeeper. But you don't have to knock politely, you can walk right through, because the fear of falling will always be there, but it's nothing compared to the regret of never taking flight. And when you realize that failure isn't the end of your story, but just one chapter in a powerful book, you'll stop fearing the fall and start embracing the climb. There's a belief that quietly runs through the minds of many people: this is just who I am. It's a simple sentence, but its impact is profound. It can feel like an anchor, keeping you tethered to the person you were yesterday, to the limitations you've always known. You hear it in the voice that says, I'm just not good with money, or I'm always bad with relationships, or I could never be successful like that. This mindset isn't just a thought, it becomes a label you wear, an identity you carry. You don't see it as a limitation, but as a fact. It's not what you do, it's who you are. And the tragedy is that when you believe this, you lock yourself into a version of yourself that can never evolve. The most important thing you can do is recognize that you are not fixed. You are becoming. Your identity is not a prison, it's a blank canvas. You don't have to be who you were yesterday. You can choose to reinvent yourself. You can decide to be someone who learns, adapts, and grows. Identity isn't something that's handed to you, it's something you create, shape, and redefine as you walk through life. You are the author of your story, and the beauty is that the next chapter is entirely up to you. The moment you realize that you can change, that you are always evolving, is the moment you unlock your true power. You are not bound by the limitations of the past. You are free to become whoever you choose.